Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Sea Stories, a series of stories and interviews about people that I've met along the way and people I want to meet. And we're very fortunate tonight to meet both Nigel Jollands and Veronica Lysaght. So please say hi to them. Hello. Hey, you guys, how are you?
Really well.
Very well,
Very
thank you,
well.
Duncan. Yeah,
Where are
good.
we
Yeah.
connecting from?
We're in Portland, Maine.
All
We've come
right.
all the way from, well, how long is it taking us to get here? 15,000 miles or thereabouts, and we're in Portland, Maine.
That seems like a lot. All right. Well, we're going to
Take
get
them
into
away.
what you do and all that in just a moment. We have a little bit of housekeeping, everyone. As you may see, we have a chat window running. And if you'd like to communicate either with us or with other people around, feel free to chat in. We normally start this with all of you who want to open your chat and type in from where you are watching. So I will type Annapolis.
Got
Uh,
someone from Cape May.
yeah, man. And there we go.
Yeah, we passed Cape May.
We did.
Yes, you did. So many of us have passed Cape May. Hey,
Hmm.
look at that. Oh, look at that. Yorktown,
Yeah.
Jack. That's got to be Keith, yeah, for sure. Oh, how fun.
Florida. Uh-huh. Wow.
Oh, that's nice. Look at you guys all over the place. I love that. All right. Well, Nigel and Veronica have quite the story, and they have quite the boat. It's the only icebreaking schooner I've ever heard of, and so I want to hear all about that. And they're going to start off talking to us a little bit about who they are, what the idea they had that started this whole thing, where they've been, and where they're going. And my friends, we have a screen ready when you are. Just call it in, and I will start it up over there. There we go.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Duncan. If you could share the screen, that'd be great. And while you're doing that, in addition to the who we are, where we've been, where we're going, we can also talk a bit about our climate change work with coastal communities. And I'm assuming everyone will be interested to hear about our wonderful vessel, Novara. We got some photos here about the world's first aero rig schooner. Um, so to begin with, let's talk about our, and this for your interest, this photo you've got up here is taken in Antarctica. This is Novara in Deception Island in the Antarctic, just off the Antarctic Peninsula. Um, Duncan, if you could go to the next slide, please.
Sir.
So this gives you a bit of an idea of our route to date. We bought the boat in London in the UK, and we sailed up into the North Sea on our sea trials, got as far north as 61 degrees north up to Shetland Islands, and then we came back down through the UK, Ireland, down to France, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. Spent a bit of time working with communities in Morocco. Then came across in January 2024. We came across the Atlantic and had time in the Windward Islands in the Caribbean, and then we spent quite a bit of time in Providencia, which is that westernmost arrow you can see there. It's a Colombian island off the coast of Nicaragua. And then in February, we started to make our way north. This is not quite up to date. We're now in Portland, Maine. And we're heading north because
We're going to attempt to go through the Northwest Passage. So we're actually meeting our crew at the moment as they come on board one by one. And our intent is to go from here to Camden, where it's a boat, so we have repairs to be done, and then to Halifax, St. John's, and then launch from St. John's to Greenland, up the west coast of Greenland, across Baffin Bay to Lancaster Sound, and go through one of the Northwest Passages. Maybe we can go along,
yeah.
but a couple of slides
But
actually.
if you go to the second slide, you'll see a bit of a history of Novara in the Arctic.
So this is,
Oh, these are the communities that we've worked with along the way, and we'll come back to that.
yeah. So this is Novara in 2014. So it's not Novara's, it's our first trip through the Northwest Passage, but it is not Novara's. So with the previous owner, Steve Brown, he circumnavigated the Americas on Novara, and this is her in the Northwest Passage in 2014. And if you go next slide, please, Duncan.
Aye.
This is our route that we intend to take, all going well. So this is the route that was taken in 2014. We intend to take a slightly different route. So we'll come up to past Nova Scotia, and then to St. John's, and then head directly north to Greenland and up the west coast of Greenland to Disco Bay. Yeah, that's it.
Just come back a bit to
Come
the
back a bit
island.
to the island.
Come back down the Greenland coast a bit there, Duncan. Yeah, down to there, just there.
Yep.
That's
And then hopefully cross Lancaster Sound once the ice clears, assuming that it will.
Bay, that's it, and then into Lancaster Sound is the plan.
And then down through one of the Northwest Passages.
Down following the red line now. We'll follow the rest.
Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah.
And into Johaven, and hopefully around into Cambridge Bay, which is just coming there. And then it's another 3,000 miles around to Nome in the Bering Strait. Yeah, there's Nome, and then another 1,000 or so
Sorry,
miles.
my fault. Excuse me.
Another 1,000 or so miles around to through the Aleutian Islands and to Kodiak Island. So that's the intended route.
How exciting!
So, I'm going to talk about the.
So, I mean, we listen, of course, to many people who have already ventured through the Northwest Passage to see what their gems of wisdom are. And one of them said to us that the Northwest Passage is, of course, a personal achievement for everybody who transits it, but is not necessarily any longer noteworthy. So as you can see from this graph, 1906, when Amundsen was the first person to transit the Northwest Passage, the green and the red, the green are all boat types and the red are the non-icebreakers. So in the next 100 years to 2006, 100 boats got through. And then in the following 10 years, 100 boats got through. So it's become that there are many boats now transiting because of climate change.
Yeah, that says a lot for the ice coverage.
Right. And if you go to the next slide, we've got slightly updated figures. There it is there. Yeah, so that's now through to 2024. You can see that the number of vessels going through is increasing significantly because ice conditions are improving, and perhaps also because the vessels are maybe a little stronger. Certainly there's less ice extent now. Next slide, please.
Oh, time for a break from our sponsor.
Oh.
Hold that thought.
This is a pitch to ask you to join us at the American Schooner Association. Founded in 1972, the American Schooner Association is dedicated to the history, preservation, and promotion of the schooner rig. You don't need to be a schooner owner to join the organization, just to be interested in these beautiful boats. As time marches forward, the role that schooners played in the history of our country is fading too. Your membership helps support educational programs and provides a base for preserving these vessels. So, join us. It's inexpensive, important, and we'd love to have you along. We'll see you at amschooner.net.
And there we go. We were back with Novara. Thank you for bearing with us. And we're back to Nigel Jollands and Veronica Lysaght. What do you got, guys?
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you. It's interesting to see those beautiful schooners. Ours is a relatively modern schooner, and that she's only 27 years old.
We're looking forward to that.
So our mission is to support coastal communities in becoming climate safe. what that means is that we work with coastal communities on whatever issue it is that they are facing at the time that we connect with them. And we basically see what their needs are, what our skills are, and can we bring those two things together to assist them in some way. So maybe the next slide, Duncan, will help to explain that a little bit better. So we have four main areas that we work on. One is to document the climate adaptation stories and listening to their challenges. Look, I think this is fundamental for us, is that we are not coming in with any particular program or any particular agenda. We very much start by saying what's happening for you, what are the changes that you have noticed, what is happening in your community, and then what do you need assistance with. So we then use a number of processes to essentially find the best way forward for whatever the issue is, and then we look for another thing that we do, and this is related to Nigel's past work, is that we look for funding for climate change adaptation, and then we also offer to connect those communities that we meet with anybody else who we've met along the way who's having similar issues. So that they're the four main sorts of issues that well, not issues, the four main areas that we work in.
Very nice.
We've got some examples of the kind of work we've done around the world. If you go to the next slide, please, Duncan. So we've worked in Africa, and this is in Morocco, where we helped the city of Agadir develop their climate adaptation plan for the city. And the next one, next slide, please, is in the island of Providencia, where we worked with a local crab hunting community to develop a funding proposal to help rebuild their kitchen and shop to sell the crab meat to tourists.
Can I just explain that was after they had a hurricane go through in November 2020. So, you know, COVID, and then on the top of that, a late hurricane in November that wiped out 90% of the infrastructure on the island, and they haven't been able to rebuild this, and so they were looking for funding to be able to bring a kitchen, rebuild and bring it up to standard again.
And were you able to stay with them through the process when they actually got funding?
We're still working with them. So they're now in the second round of the funding proposal. The first round they were shortlisted, and then we've worked with them on the second round. We're still they submitted that 6 weeks ago, and we're waiting for the funder to announce who is the winner of this.
Very exciting.
Still waiting. Next slide, please. You want to talk about CERT?
Yeah. So we're also working with a community emergency response team in Providencia. This is an exercise where I'm basically facilitating what is it that they want to discuss. What is it that is the most important issue on the table? So we're down there with our sticky notes doing a voting process to figure out what it is that needs to be sorted out. And that is the facilitation is a very important way philosophically that we work, is that we're not going in with a product, we're going in and asking what is it that is needed, and we then help figure that out. In this occasion for the community emergency response team, they needed to apply for funding to train people so that when they have their annual floods and droughts and potential hurricanes, they've got a team who can go in and support them. And to do that, to be able to apply for funding, they needed to have an organization. So it sounds very pedestrian, but actually what they needed to do was form an organization. To form an organization, they needed a what do you call it? A constitution of that organization, so the rules of engagement. So that's what we ended up doing with them in Providencia.
So just a couple more examples, and then I think it would be useful to tell a little bit about our story about how we got into this. But if you could go to the next slide, please. This is us talking at a climate conference. This is in Lerwick in the Shetland Islands. So this is the one way up north. And if you go to the next one, in Dominica, we worked with the local farming community to document the work that they're doing on climate adaptation, particularly how to deal with hurricanes. And then the next one, please, is in the Outer Hebrides in Scotland. We helped them promote some of the work that the council was doing on raising awareness around climate change and the impacts on those communities. So those are some examples of the sort of things that we've done. But I think now might be a useful time to just introduce about why we're doing this. Why did we buy the boat? And why are we doing this climate change stuff? Do you want to
Good.
start?
That's a very good segue. We're going to get through a little bit about the Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race, and then we'll come right back to you. I'm looking forward to that.
Perfect.
Sounds like a pretty interesting time here. Hold on to your hats. There's a little bit of sound. Just another contribution from Grandpa Studios. Welcome back, everybody. It's great to see you all. And here we are with Nigel and Veronica and Novara. We were just about to get into the boat, and this is a good spot for it. What can you tell us, Nigel?
Well, I think before the boat, we should do a little bit of an introduction about why we bought such an interesting vessel. And I think Veronica is going to start us off.
Okay, so Nigel, we're New Zealanders, so that's a strange accent. And were living in London, and Nigel, who had sailed most of his life, we had a small boat at the local yacht club in Greenwich Yacht Club. And he used to look at yachts and dream about sailing to New Zealand. And I was, yeah, have a nice time, darling. See you in the warm places where you go. I wasn't particularly interested, I have to say. And then in 2019, the beginning of 2019, my sister passed away rather suddenly. And she was the 5th member of my family to die between the age of 45 and 61. And I was 55 at the time, and I went, right, well, this is not a way to live. If we want to live, then we need to do the things that we dream about doing. So we had a couple of reactions. First, Nigel said, well, he wants to go do it with a purpose.
Want to sail home. We decided I really wanted to sail home to New Zealand. Yeah.
And the second one, as I said, well, I want to go home an interesting way. So, you note that I was not the sailor, and I thought the Northwest Passage sounds interesting, not knowing at all what I was letting myself in for. Yeah. So when we then said, well, what can we do that would be with a purpose? And we looked at our skills. Mine was in facilitation and coaching and training. And Nigel?
Yeah, I worked in climate change, policy, finance, and so on for 30 years.
And Nigel, were you retired when this began between the two of you to do this passage?
No, I left my work to do this. So now we are, I wouldn't say we're retired.
No, in fact, Nigel's just picked up a new contract, so we're definitely not retired. We're working on board.
Yeah. But we're at the end of our career, so we've got a bit of money saved up to fund, because we don't have any sponsors or anything. We're just paying for this out of our savings, and then we pick up consulting work as well. because schooners are expensive, as you may know.
Really?
Really, really.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
yeah. So we sold our house in London to buy the boat, and that's
that's it.
That's it.
That's it. Maybe we could talk about.
Was it about 2013, 2014 in there?
No, we bought the boat in 2022 in October, but we'd been working with the previous owner since the middle of 2020.
21.
Middle of 21. Yeah. And if you go back to the slides there, Duncan, we can now talk about the moment that everybody's been waiting for.
Da-da-da!
About Novara, the world's first aero rig schooner. And so she always attracts interest wherever we are. People come up to you, what sort of rigs do you call those? Never seen one of those before. Or it's someone who's recognized us because the boat stands out, obviously. And the further north we've got on the East Coast, people are coming up to us saying, hey, I've recognized this boat. So Novara was built in the Netherlands. She's designed by the famous naval architect Gerard Dijkstra and built at a very prestigious yard now called KM Yachts. So they build expedition aluminum, or aluminum, as you say, expedition yachts. She is ice strengthened, so double stringers, and she has 4 centimeters. What's that in inches? 1.5 inch thick aluminium at the bow, and very, very thick aluminium hull, 20 millimeters at the keelson, 15 millimeters. I'm sorry, I'm talking in metric. So those of you who Imperial may not know what I'm talking about. 15 millimeters to the waterline, 10 mils above, and 8 millimeter decking. So
Is she fairly heavy?
She's heavy. She's 30 tons. Veronica, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, so she's 30 tons. She has accommodation for 6. So although she is 18 meters overall in length, she's 13 meters at the waterline. So she has an icebreaking bow and a canoe stern. So in a following sea, instead of having a flat transom, the waves will more come around.
It's very sea kindly.
She's sea kindly. The rig is what attracts most people's attention because she has 2 carbon fiber freestanding aero rigs masts. The yard is attached, and if you think the yard and the boom pivot is one. So did I said the yard and the boom, the mast and the yard pivot and move is one. My apologies.
You're calling this extension of the boom your yard, is that correct?
So we refer to them as yards because a boom tends to hinge off the mast, whereas our foreyard and aft yard are attached hard to the mast, and the mast rotates. And it's a semi-balanced rotating rig because we have around the center of effort, we have a small blade jib at the front, and then a large, heavily roached mainsail on the aft yard. And that means the semi-balanced element means that we have very little weight on the main sheet, and we only have the 2 main sheets in the cockpit as working sheets. So for 2 of us, we sail the boat, the 2 of us, and she's quite easy to handle in that respect.
I'm sure tacking is a dream.
Easy to tack, although she's a big heavy boat with a centerboard keel. Should we go to the next slide, because this will show you what's under the waterline? Is it on the boat? Let's see if there's any questions. Okay, so this gives you a sense of under the waterline. What can we mention there? It's a centerboard, so a centerboard on a central pivot. The centerboard is weighted. It's 3 tons, but it gives us a 10-foot draft when it's down, and when it's up, we draw just under 6 feet.
You can also see the dagger board.
Yeah,
That's halfway down.
Now, is that what we're looking here?
Yes.
Yes.
You want to explain why?
Oh,
So the
sorry.
daggerboard, no, you do that.
Oh, the daggerboard's for downwind sailing. And so when we're sailing downwind, in order to give us stability, we put both of the daggerboards down. We've also used it on occasion when we've noticed that there's been quite a lot of leeway, and we'll put the leeward board down, and that sometimes helps us to balance the helm a little bit.
Mhm.
Um,
I can see that. So these dagger boards, as defined, slide up into the hull somewhat.
yeah, they do. Right. So we manually haul them up with a line. So that's down for painting. But when it's up, it protrudes about an inch or two.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you can see that the rudder has what, ice deflectors, or given that we're in Maine, lobster pot deflectors.
Is that here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the propeller.
That's the
Yeah.
oh, sorry, the propeller. Did I say the rudder? My
Yeah.
apologies. The propeller.
Now, is
You
this a
can
folding
see-
propeller we have here?
Yeah.
You can see the propeller's quite flat there. We have a hydraulically controlled variable pitch propeller by West Meakin. And so it's in the very coarse position at the moment. We can feather that off as we're sailing. The rudder, what do you talk about? So the rudder is fully stepped there on the skeg that joins the keelson. And the keelson is what we refer to as a keelson, is the long, that's it there, exactly. That's about a foot to a foot and a half in width. So the boat can dry out on the keelson. And we sailed down the coast of Portugal. I don't know if you are aware that Portugal has a spate of orca attacks recently
I
on.
know that, really.
Yeah, so there's an area around Portugal where boats were having their keels bitten off, and yes, a couple of
and rudders bitten off.
what did I say? Keels. Yeah, I'm
rudders.
getting my words mixed up as well. So the rudders, the orcas would come in and bite off chunks of the rudders, which in some boats meant that the rudder post was pulled out, and a couple of them have sunk. So we were going down there, and we were feeling very confident about the strength of Novara. We were hoping an orca would come and try and take it out of our rudder boat.
No such luck, huh?
No such luck, thankfully, probably. So she's a big strong rudder there, and as Veronica said, we've got the ice deflectors around the propeller.
Yeah. We have a little comment here. The question is, do you try to protect the propeller from ice conditions?
Yes. So if you could use your mouse, please, Duncan. It's hard to see here, but if you go to the propeller and just if you raise your mouse, put your mouse a little forward to the boat, just beneath where Duncan's mouse is are two ice deflectors that Veronica mentioned, and they come out about a foot from the keelson there, and they are what, about a quarter of an inch, probably quarter inch thick, and they sweep back a little bit, and they are for deflecting ice away from the propeller.
Got it.
That's what also gives us a little bit of confidence when we're going around lobster pots.
My experience with lobster pots is it's just bad juju. We have another comment asking about the overall reliability of your Aero rig while we're here.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide, because you can see Novara under full sail. There you go, full roached main and the blade jibs up. The Aero rig, so there are two components we can talk about. One is the structure of them. So they are carbon fiber and freestanding. So we don't have any standing rigging, which means getting around the boat is very easy. We have wide side decks that we can go forward to the foremast on.
I'm totally envious of that setup right now.
Yeah, it's I mean, for safety, and we have solid stainless 20 mil stainless bars all the way along the side decks. I don't know if you can see it on that photo there, but
Yeah. Now, are your it looks to me like your mains are on slugs, so this does not roll. it drops, right?
It drops, so they're fully battened. Yeah, yeah.
Fully battened drop. And then
It's
you've got
just
roller furling on the two.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's slab reefing, and of course you have to roll away your jib before you reef, because you don't want the blade jib to then be turning you a direction that you don't want the rig to be going in. So
Mm.
the first thing you do to reef is to roll away the jib, and then reef, and then re-raise again. So that's my job generally, to be sailing handling.
Sail handling, yeah.
And I look at these people with, in mast furling with some enviousness when I'm doing this in heavy seas.
I don't doubt that for a moment.
So the question was about reliability.
Yeah.
So the reliability of the carbon fiber structure, they were removed in 2021, 22, and we had them completely inspected and reconditioned after 25 years. They were 25 years old. There were no structural problems with them at all, except some delamination around the point where the yards meet the mast. There was some flexing, and you can imagine there's quite a lot of load at that point, and we found that there was some delamination, mainly caused by the plywood that had been inset into, and if you can look at the foremast, just around the point where the mast and the yard meet, just up there, you can see some small dark areas. Those are winches and clutches. And those are, because they can't be bolted directly into carbon fiber, there is plywood sandwiched in between them. And that plywood had got moisture into it and then expanded. And so we've since changed all that and had them rebuild. So reliability of the carbon fiber element seems good. They've been in some extreme conditions. They're very flexible masts, so they're regarded, sometimes some people call them the wobbly mast, because up at the top of the mast, when under a heavy wind, they can move up to 2 or 3 feet. They can flex up to 2 or 3 feet.
That's amazing. Now, about you had mentioned it's actually the masts that rotate.
Yeah.
So do you have some sort of bearing system down in here?
We do. So let's talk about the reliability of the bearing system as well. They're very simple. The mast sits in a bronze boot, and the bronze boot has a pin which is about 3 inches. So the mast itself is, I don't know, let's say 12 inches in diameter. The bronze boot comes down to a 3-inch pin that sits in a Delrin bearing. So that's all it is, just a piece of hard engineering plastic that we grease. So that's around, that's at the keel stepped area, right down on the keel. And then as it goes up through the deck, there is a Vesconite bearing that is both concave and convex. So the outside of the bearing is concave and the inside is convex, and that allows the mast to flex slightly as it goes through the decking.
Oh, I see. And it looks to me like your masts are oval shaped. Do they go round as they go through the deck?
They do, exactly. Very, very observant. So once they get the round cross section all the way up to the yard, and then they go rectangular at the point where the yard meets, and then from the yard up, they've got a teardrop shape.
Quite an engineering feat.
It's an incredible engineering feat. The interesting thing is, the guy who had them built, Damon Roberts, who was the designer and manufacturer of them back in 1997, he tried to get these aero rigs into the recreational sailing market and failed because they're just too expensive. He then realized the error of his ways and went and started selling them to super yachts. And he then built the freestanding rotating carbon fiber masts for the Maltese Falcon, the Sailing USA, and Black Pearl. So these are the prototypes, and Damon Roberts keeps a close eye on us because they give an indication of the longevity and reliability.
How interesting. You know, of course, many of us, if not most of us, have seen those other yachts, and it's kind of cool to see the pedigree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody says, are there standard names for each of the masts and the 4 sails?
Well, they're probably not the technical names, but we have the aft we refer to as the mizzen, just so nobody gets their fores and afts mixed up. Because if you talk about the main, are you talking about the fore main or the aft main or the fore jib or the aft jib? And it's kind of like does your head in.
Yeah.
So we just talk about the mizzen, although she's not a mizzen, and the fore
And the foremate.
and
Yeah.
the fore main.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we decided when we stepped on board to use that as convention.
Yeah.
Whether
And
that's accurate or not in proper sailing parlance, I'm not sure.
I don't think it is, but it's yeah.
well, with a boat like this, my goodness. And somebody has asked, is this a ketch or is it a schooner? And you know what? I think it's kind of up to you to make that decision.
Well, we can answer that, to be honest.
Oh, good.
From this angle, you might be mistaken to see it as a ketch. However, the two masts are exactly the same length, and the foremast is stepped slightly lower, so that the aft mast
Interesting.
is the aft mast sits at about 63, was it 63 feet, and
63.
the foremast sits at 62 feet.
So we had an interesting trip in that we just recently spent a few days only on the ICW, the Intracoastal Waterway.
Yeah, you should have been able to just make it through.
Well,
We've got aerials.
so we got aerials on top of that and
Oh,
lightning
no.
rod deflectors. So Nigel went up the mizzen and took those down, and then we were able to make it through on low water. We would generally wait till the boards were telling us it was 67 or 68 feet before we
Yeah.
our hearts in our mouths and went under the bridges.
Yeah.
Well, I think your controlling depth is 65, if I remember. I control.
Yeah.
But you never quite know, and I certainly didn't want to hit them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they are. So we consider ourselves a schooner. I hope that answers the question.
Another question has come across. Do you manually set the angles of the yards depending on the angle of attack?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we control the angle of the masts from two sheets that come back to the cockpit. And that has a number of advantages. And one of them is that if we decide to reef, for example, and we decide she goes better with more power forward and slightly less in the mizzen. So if we decide to reef, we can keep the mizzen sailing and allow the fore to rotate into the wind so that I can do the process of reefing.
Understood completely. Now, I know that you guys have prepared the boat for ice. Can you go through ice with sails?
Generally not. Generally, we would motor. I mean, we can sail. Depends what sort of ice you're talking about. We're classed to go through up to 7/10 ice, and at that point we would be using the motor to push our way through. If you're just talking about growlers and brash ice and so on, then depending on the sea state and the conditions, we could be potentially sailing. Yes,
How about that?
it really depends. There's something else about the angle of attack. So the interesting thing about these Aero rigs is that we sail with them now. We've got new sails. We just took delivery of new sails in Charleston. We now sail at about 35, 40 degrees to the wind.
What?
Yeah, which is quite astounding. When we had the old sails on, we were doing 60 degrees, and the guys who put the new sails on said you'll really notice the difference, and we certainly have. Incredible. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is that when the wind starts to come back from the bow along the beam, we continually rotate manually, to answer the question, by easing off the sheet so that the yards are always at about 35 to 40 degrees to the wind, all the way to the beam. And so when you see us sailing with the wind to the beam, then our masts have rotated all the way around to 30 degrees off until it gets to the after the beam, and then we start to sail with them more like spinnakers with the wind pushing us.
For sure.
And often in that situation, we drop the mizzen jib. So if we've got a following wind, so that it's not blanketing the foremain.
Yeah, makes all the sense in the world. Would I be right in guessing your hull speed is somewhere around 8, 9, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, perfect conditions in sea state.
Yeah.
We averaged 7 coming across the Atlantic with the following sea.
With the following sea, 7 knots. That was all up. Yeah. And she, she's a heavy yacht, so takes a bit of wind to get us moving. And again, it depends on sea state, and where the direction of the wind. Generally, anything less than 10 knots, we can't sail unless it's right on the beam and it's a very flat.
I completely understand that.
Yeah, 15 to 20 knots is our sweet spot. That's perfect for us.
Great. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, that's nice. Where are we now?
That was in Portimao in Portugal. We actually had quite a bit of work done. One of the things that we have done since we've owned Novara is to schedule maintenance stops, because she's 27 years old. There was a lot of maintenance to be done, and for the first yearish, things broke at an alarming rate, and we were a bit disheartened by the whole project. And then we had a wonderful crew member come on board who's actually with us at the moment, and she said, right, you need a maintenance schedule and you need to regularly stop to allow that maintenance to happen. And now that we've built that into what we do, it's better, isn't it?
Yeah. We're more proactive maintenance now because we live aboard, right? So it's not the sort of thing you can tolerate very easily if your heads break. So
totally understandable. You bet.
Yeah, so we make sure that we've just replaced the macerator, even though it was working, but it was just so old we were concerned that it was going to crap out.
That's a very valuable concern.
Yeah.
What is your maintenance your schedule? I mean, do you go 3 months? Do you go a half a year? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are very lucky to have Maddie, one of our crew members and friends, on board. She is a lieutenant commander in the New Zealand Navy and an engineer, marine engineer. So she's in charge of warships, engineering systems. She's helped us develop this maintenance schedule, and we do quarterly maintenance stops. So every 3 months, we know, and we book ahead. We know that we're going to be stopping and dealing with whatever's breaking, that we have, things that we can reasonably delay. And generally, we stop for 2 to 3 weeks every quarter. And I think probably, gosh, this is going to tempt fate, isn't it? Probably to date, they've been getting shorter, our maintenance stops, because we've been doing some big work, dealing with a lot of the bigger systems. In addition to that, we have a monthly maintenance rotation, which involves, and I have a spreadsheet where I note moving all of the seacocks. So once a month, all of them, I go around systematically, open and close several times each of the seacocks.
Very wise of you. You bet. Yeah.
I inspect them all. One of them we've replaced recently. So that sort of thing, the greasing of the steering mechanism and the stern gland, those kinds of things are all part of that all part of that monthly maintenance schedule. Lowering anchors because we have 3 anchors on board, just working the windlasses to make sure that they're not going to seas up. So that sort of thing.
Yeah, I understand it. We've got another couple questions coming through. How do you heat it? What do you do?
Oh, yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
Great boat. We have a separate Cabola system and 6 radiators. It will take 10 minutes to take her from being, walking in the door. I'm going to do centigrade, walking in the door, and it's 8 degrees to bring her up to 18.
Wow.
Fully insulated. One of the jobs that we need to do is just reseal the hatches, but she gets toasty warm really fast. The only thing that is cold, of course, is the cabin sole. So we just wear slippers. That's it.
Yeah, the radiator system's great. It's diesel fired, and we carry a lot of diesel.
It's what we call hydronic, I believe. You've got the coolant flowing through the furnace, right? As opposed to just airflow going across a thing.
Yeah, well, we
Like a
heat, that's
car.
right. Right, and the radiators, we have like a domestic radiator system, so the hot water runs through all the radiators.
Nigel and Veronica, we have somebody here asking about the engine rebuild refurbish after the circumnavigation of the Americas and 2 trips to Antarctica and the Atlantic crossing back to Europe. Let's
Yeah,
talk about the engine.
let's talk the engine. Well, okay, so we have a Perkins Sabre M, so marinized 135 horse workhorse, you could call it. It's got 5,500 hours on since the last rebuild, which was in 2014, the last major rebuild where it was removed and rebored and so on. And what have we done on the engine? Well, actually, let me tell you, we have had a few problems. We have one problem in terms of water ingress, which I know is not unusual through the exhaust system. So we've now, I think, touch wood, solved that. So we've had seawater into the cylinders twice.
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we've managed that. Well, now I hope we've solved it. We treat it well with good fuel and regular oil changes and filter changes every 250 hours. We're changing oil.
And that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what else we have here. Let's talk crew.
Okay. Well,
So these are not actually our crew, although Bob Shepton has been crew. Novara is a not-for-profit organization, Novara One Planet. So these are our advisors. So Bob Shepton is a legend in the Arctic sailing, and he has been through the Northwest Passage how many times?
14, something.
Yes,
Something.
some crazy number. Both east to west and west to east. And beside Bob, you'll see there is Pippa Lady Blake. She is the widow of Sir Peter Blake, who, as New Zealanders, is very much a household name. Sir Peter Blake. And then we have some other advisors as well. We have a member, if you want to go to the next slide. There's Steve Brown, who's the former owner of Novara, and he is the winner of the Tillman Medal and the Cruising Club of America's Far Horizon. And that was for his circumnavigation of the Americas. So starting in May in 2014 through the Northwest Passage, south to the Antarctic, around the Horn, and then a side trip to Georgia and
Falklands.
And the Falklands.
Yeah.
And then back up the east coast. So huge distances in Novara. Dr. Victoria Siddle is a marine scientist and policy expert in New Zealand. And she is mainly looking at gender and climate change in the Pacific. So Victoria will really be of the greatest assistance to us when we start working with coastal communities in the Pacific. She has wonderful contacts and is very knowledgeable particularly about the fisheries communities in the Pacific. And if you want to go to the next slide, please, Duncan. Professor Bruce Glavovic, who's going to join us in 2 days' time, and it will be his first time on board Novara. But he is an IPCC author and has also worked with communities and developed an UNESCO guidelines on working with coastal communities on climate adaptation. And Nazreen El-Sayem is a Sudanese youth climate activist, and she was the chair of the UN's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change. So she was very active in climate change. So we have a mix essentially of those who are sailing experts and those who are climate change experts. Essentially,
Fascinating.
yeah.
And where did you find these folks?
So just to explain that they're advising us rather than necessarily sailing with us. We have a group of crew who are going to be joining us for the Northwest Passage, which we'll outline who they are, but there was a question about where do we find them?
So where do we find them? Actually, all word of mouth. So Nazreen, we worked in Sudan for a while, so Nazreen was there. Bruce, we knew as a friend when we lived in New Zealand. So New Zealand's a good networking place. You've only got to raise your head. So the New Zealanders are all word of mouth. Steve was a former owner, and Steve knew Bob Shepton, so it's all word of mouth.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, you certainly have a sailing culture out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do have, I don't know if you've got time, but we could give you a brief outline of our crew who are going to be on board with us. We have 4 other people joining us.
Sure.
For the
Sure. We've got a little bit of time, you bet.
Yeah.
So Maddie Wynne, who's a lieutenant commander in the New Zealand Navy, who we've already mentioned, and is one of our engineers and a very experienced sailor as well. Do you want to do?
Yeah, and then Andy McEwen. He's a Scottish guy we met at a climate conference in Outer Hebrides, and he came up to us and said, "I really want to sail with you." And we were like, "Okay, that's great, but we tend to have this sort of 3-day rule, right? You come on board for 3 days, we see whether we get on or not."
Yeah, we call that the fish rule.
The fish rule, yeah, exactly. And he was pretty insistent. I was not quite sure, really, but anyway, eventually he kept insisting, and he joined us in Portugal for the 3 days, and he didn't get off for 6 months. He's amazing. He's an engineer.
He's good fun.
He's great fun, but he's also very self-contained, which you have to be on a boat.
Yeah.
And he joined us across the Atlantic and in Morocco. So that's Andy. And then we have Steve Brown, who I think you may know already, previous owner. And then Steve.
And then so Siga Clark, who is one of New Zealand's top navigators, again a word of mouth contact, and Siga joined us on our trip up to Shetland to the North Sea. So everybody who's coming through the Northwest Passage has spent significant time on Novara already, and they all know. Yeah, there's a couple of gaps of who sailed with who, but part of when we crossed the Atlantic, part of that was testing out how people would go with each other. And we put Andy and Maddie, the 2 engineers, together on board for that trip, and they were absolutely brilliant. They got on together incredibly well. So
Yeah.
they
Such a wise way to do it. Such a wise way. All right, let's see what we got over here. That's a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting photograph. This was when Steve had the boat in Antarctica, and this is an interesting photo because it looks like Novara is sailing between a number of different icebergs. It turns out that this is a single iceberg. All the ice you can see in this is a single iceberg, and they didn't realize it at the time, but these icebergs have a habit of rotating. Once they lose the weight, they can flip up, and he's sailing over the middle of this ice. But regardless of that, it's such a beautiful shot of.
It's an amazing shot. Do you guys carry a drone with you normally?
We have 2 drones on board. We don't own a drone ourselves, unfortunately, but Maddie, our crew, has just bought 2 drones. Why 2? Because drones tend to get lost pretty easily.
So We've had two, kind of visiting crew who've come on board, and they've lost drones on
Yeah.
Novara. So one was in the Irish Sea, and the one was in Morbihan
That's right.
in France, northwest France. So yeah,
They're great for social media, but more importantly, they're really important for us to be able to check out the ice conditions from above.
Of course they are. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
If you can find leads through
Yeah.
the ice using these drones, yeah, it saves climbing up into the crow's nest.
Oh my God, yes. Well, what a stunning picture this is. My goodness. Oh,
There's a question here from
right.
Keith Jones. Mm-hmm.
The story about the dangers of anchoring in an ice field. Can
Yeah,
you do that?
yeah, there are certainly dangers. Whenever we anchor around ice, we always have a permanent ice watch. So there's always someone on watch. We don't all go to bed like you would in the Caribbean, put down the ice, put down that anchor, and then everyone gets to bed. The reason for that is ice moves, and if you have ice drifting towards your anchor, it can sink the boat because it can ride up through the chain and pull the bow down in the boat, sink the boat. That's the kind of catastrophic outcome. The slightly less bad option is that your anchor gets stuck under an ice floe and you can't move, and you then have to abandon the anchor. That's why we have two anchors at the bow and one at the stern. So
You carry a tremendous amount of chain or road out there.
we carry a lot of chain. So we have 80 meters of stainless half-inch chain and a 55 kilo Rockner as our primary anchor. Um, we had a 50 kilo Bruce anchor and another 80 meters of stainless chain. But as we were coming around Hatteras in rather heavy conditions, our lashings chafed and we lost it all overboard.
Oh, it must have been frightening.
It was frightening, and we were only in 30 meters of water and we were doing 9 knots. If that had stuck, so luckily it ripped out of its the anchor point inside the anchor locker, and didn't bed down. It could have been a pretty catastrophic thing. So anyway, that's
very deep.
No, 30 meters deep.
Yeah.
So we're in the process of replacing that now. We can't afford to put the stainless back in because that's $13,000 worth of chain.
That's a lot.
So we're putting galvanized in, and we'll put 60 meters of galvanized and a 110-pound Bruce.
Yeah. Good plan. We are approaching the end of our time here, my friends. If you were to describe what you guys do in a nutshell, can you give me sort of I don't know, an elevator pitch, if you will, about you two, what the project is?
We're a couple of crazy Kiwis who thought about sailing home to Novarra with a purpose. And I think what's really important is that we can all. I have the saying that why choose to have an ordinary life when you have the possibility of leading an extraordinary one? And that kind of, I think, sums us up. Don't you think that?
I think so. I
think that's just marvelous. You couldn't have put a button on it even better than that. You can see we've got some
comments
on the side.
there. Yeah, I've just read one comment from Matt Jensen Young. Yeah, wonderful to know that there are people who have seen and met Novarra before.
Wow.
And we're hoping that we're doing Novarra proud and keeping her seaworthy and continuing the adventures.
And our friend Cesare is asking, he doesn't understand how such a small keel is able to provide enough uprighting moment for the boat's stability and upwind points of sail.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
We have a lot of ballast. We also, all our tankage is built into the hull. So when we are fully loaded with fuel, that's 500 gallons of fuel and 500 gallons of water. There's a lot of weight down there.
Yeah, 9 pounds a gallon, that'll do it. Absolutely. Well, Nigel and Veronica, I'm so glad we had this chance. And I caught you before you went around the corner of Nova Scotia. And you were leading such an interesting trip. You know, the Northwest Passage throughout history has been just a terrible, horrible place. And now that it is possible to get through, that doesn't make it any less dangerous. And it doesn't make the feat any less impressive. And I'm so fortunate and glad that we had the time to chat about this tonight.
Thank
And
you
you
so
see, we got a lot of people saying thank you and good luck.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. You can follow us. So we have our website will show where we are, and we'll be updating that regularly. You can also follow us. We do social media, not very well because we're a little older than being teenagers, but we try our best.
Yeah, well, here is, for those of you who want to take a quick look or jot it down, these are their contact points. So take a look at that. And having said that, my friends, summer is coming. Northwest Passage, and I am heading out to work the next 2 months running charters. So Sea Stories, as always, takes a break for the months of July and August, which where we live is just awful. Hot and sticky, and I really, really envy your trip. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll have this edited out and up on our websites probably within 3 or 4 days. Do keep an eye. And there we go with that. And we're going to take a quick look over here. And Nigel, Veronica, thank you for your time. Fair winds and fair seas.
Thank you very much, Duncan.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Delight to be
everybody.
here. Thank you.
It's been a real delight. Thank you, my friends. And there you go.
Lovely. Thank you,
Lovely.
Duncan.
That
Thank you.
wasn't too bad now, was it?
Oh, that was
Not
great.
at all. Not at all.
That was
Hope
very
it was.
good.
Hope it went well for you.
Oh, it's always good for me, man. I live this way.
Wonderful.
All
It
right,
seems
you
like
guys.
that you have an engaged audience there, so that's really
Oh,
lovely
you're
to
very
see.
kind. Well, it's a wonderful group of people we have watching, and I'm so glad you could help out.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. And I
Have a good
presume
And
you're
for those of you
sending
still
some.
watching,
Yeah.
go have some dinner.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Thank